Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand Farouk, and I'm here with my co-host, Nick Sigelski. And today, we have the one and only. It is Lyle Ryals, the cold calling leader machine. He is the senior manager of business development over at RocketReach. Nick, why should people listen?
So Lyle has a really interesting perspective on cold calls. You've probably heard us talk about the permission-based opener on this podcast, and Lyle has some advice that challenges that and a really different approach. So if you want to hear from someone who's doing really, really well in the prospecting game, Lyle's someone you got to listen to. All right, Lyle, welcome to the show. We start every single episode with your top 3 actionable takeaways. So let's get your 3.
Okay, number 1, get rid of the permission-based opener, right? There's no hierarchy in sales. No one's time is more important than yours. When the prospect answers the phone, that's your permission. So when someone answers the phone, you're going to confirm their name, authority, and jump right in with your first question. So for example, I would say, hey, is this Nick? Nick says, yes. I say, hey, are you heading up business development over at Acme? Nick would say yes. And then from there, I would say, awesome. How are you guys going about finding contact data today?
Beautiful. What's number 2?
Number 2 is peel the onion on your cold call. So don't go into the call with an agenda. The prospect is the focus, not you. So the way you peel the onion is by always asking questions based off of what you're told. For example, if I said, hey, Nick, how are things going over at Acme? Nick would say, things are going okay. I would then ask, when you say okay, what do you mean by that? Just to get some more color there.
Very nice. Round us out, Lyle. What's number 3?
And then number 3, ask for positives instead of negatives. So you want your prospect to give you the pain. So don't self-diagnose someone or assume something is wrong before you sit down with the patient. So for example, I would say, hey, Nick, how are you guys going about finding contact data today? Nick says, hey, we're using Lucia. I would say, sweet, awesome platform. What are you loving about it? Instead of saying, hey, are you having any issues today? Are you having problems doing X, Y, and Z?
Alrighty, Lyle. I want to start with the way that you're opening. And the reason for that is we've had a lot of people come on the podcast and say, you should never validate who you're talking to. You should look it up on LinkedIn and assume that you have the right person. And then they will correct you if you're wrong. And so I'm curious, why do you go about validating who's actually on the line?
Yeah, so the best way to keep someone on the phone is by asking them questions. So the first 3 questions I'm asking them what their name is. I'm asking them what department they head up. And then I'm getting into my talk track. But the reason why I ask what their responsibilities are or their authority, some would say, is because people love to confirm authority, right? If I'm the CRO of a business and someone asks me, am I heading up revenue? Am I heading up sales? I'm going to say yes. It's a very easy question to answer. And it just keeps the prospect talking as well.
You're actually making them engage with you inch by inch. Everyone's going to answer yes, this is Nick. And the next question is also pretty easy. Also, it's, hey, do you head up this? And now what you've done is you've created a space where they said yes once, they gave you an answer twice, and now they're talking to you, and you're actually less of a stranger than if you hit him out of the blue with a permission-based opener. Seems to me to be the strategy that you have.
I think the more nuanced thing about your approach is if someone cold called me when I was the VP of sales over at Pave and they're like, is this Armand? I'm like, yeah, here we go. What do we got? But if they're like, hey, you run up the sales org at Pave, right? I would be like, well, yes, I do, mister. And I was like, what is this regarding? So it's a little bit of an ego stroking. And so I didn't think about it from the perspective of validating authority. I thought you were just like, hello, are you the VP of sales at Pave? And I'd be like, dude, you can read my LinkedIn. I want to talk about the opening 2 questions that you ask. So you say, who are you using for contact data? That gets you the current state. And then you say, what do you love about him? Let's say they say Lucia or someone like that. They might say, I love how Lucia seems easy to use, cheap, etc. Why do you ask? Where do you take it from there?
Yeah, so normally when you ask for positive, people are just, it's like human nature to correct the other person. So they'll be like, actually, it's going okay. It's not amazing, right? So if you ask my girlfriend, how awesome is Lyle, right? She's just be like, whoa, slow down. Like, he's okay. He's not the best boyfriend in the world, but right? So it's the same thing with the prospects, right? We assume the positive so that we can get like a true read on what's going on. You're bringing down the walls of it, making them comfortable. Most salespeople are going to go into the call just digging and picking at the negative. They want to find out what's going wrong, right? So they can sell their offering. But you can reduce some of the friction and bring down their walls when you just assume that things are going really well.
Yeah. And so it's funny, I've asked Nick's fiance a number of times, both positive and negative, and I always get returned with the negatives. What do you do when someone gives you mostly, it's fine type of answers?
So I'd ask, hey, nice. How long have you been with Lucia? Because what I want to understand here is I want to take them back to a previous state of pain, because I know where we win against Lucia. So let me take them back to a previous state of pain where I can understand what they were using previously, what prompted the switch, what they were trying to solve. Hey, we were using Apollo. We switched to Lucia because their data quality was terrible, right? And I can ask some questions around that. Now I understand what they were trying to solve. And then I can follow up on where are you at with that initiative today? How are you finding blank? How are you finding the direct phone numbers or personal? I can ask more specific questions to then get them to give me the pain, because there's still pain there, even though they gave me a positive.
So what you're doing is Armand says, oh, we use Lucia. You're then asking, how long have you been using that solution? And then when he says, oh, we've been on it for 6 months or a year or 18 months, you're then routing the conversation to what prompted you to move to it? What was the reason that you moved to it? Because what you want them saying is, oh, we had this problem and we were looking to solve it with this move. And most of the time when somebody makes a move like that, they solve it a bit, but it's usually not nail in the coffin, solved 100%. And then that creates an opening for you to talk about basically solving the original problem from 18 months ago, even better than where they are today. Am I getting that right? And then if so, where do you take the conversation from there?
No, you're absolutely correct. I haven't even talked about my offering yet, what I have to offer, how we're helping customers. So I also understand their journey. I understand they were using X provider before they switched to this provider. They didn't say, oh, I'm having a terrible time with Lucia. That'd be a home run. But I take them back to a time where they were struggling and they were having issues. So I understand what's top of mind for them, and then I can hone in on those. So moving forward, I would say you were looking to solve issue X. Like, how are you doing with that initiative today?
Someone says, I'm on Lucia, and honestly, it seems like things are doing reasonably okay with contact data quality. Where do you take it from there?
Yeah, so the plan here would be to dig a little bit deeper. I want to ask them about specifics as it relates to data quality. And once I uncover some sort of pain, I can spend the rest of my time digging deeper there, understanding how long they've been in that pain for, how it's affecting their team on a day-to-day, what have they done, if anything, to fix it. I would position my solution as a way to either save money, make money, or mitigate some sort of risk.
But I'm assuming there are some times that you get hit with an objection. Let's go back to that cost one, and you haven't pulled out all of that information qualifying the extent of the pain. Someone says RocketReach is too expensive. I've looked before, but you don't know how much time their team is wasting. How do you even think about approaching a situation like that?
I want to understand how they quantify success with a data provider or whatever tool for that matter. So asking something like, okay, totally understand. How do you quantify success with a data provider? What does that even look like?
Your first inclination is to ask a question to understand more about that objection. And Armand, I think you have a similar approach. I know you ran into this a lot when you were at Carta.
Yeah, and so oftentimes when I was at Carta was quite an expensive solution. So most cap table solutions were, I don't know, some of them were literally like $500, and we were sometimes 10 times the cost. And my approach was a little bit different, but my first point was always to agree with the objection. And if you've heard us on the podcast before, this is the first step of the Mr. Miyagi method for handling objections, is agreeing with the objection. I would usually say, honestly, completely makes sense. Usually when you're looking at someone like CapShare, they're going to be way cheaper. That said, we're rarely out of line. From there, I want to incentivize them to share some more information. I want to get them talking, just like what you're doing. Wow. And so I'll say, hey, just so no one calls you again, I want to make sure that this one's truly dead. Was it that we were just, in aggregate, way too expensive? Was it just sticker shock? Or was it the fact that you didn't see the value in what we were offering? So I want to pin down, is this just you saw the 10K number and you were like, no, I'm paying 500? Or was this, no, you could take the 10K number, but you didn't see enough value in it? And 9 times out of 10, it's usually a crappy rep who couldn't deal with the sticker shock of going from 500 to 10K. And so they'll be like, no, it's just way more than we were paying now. And that's when I'll do something similar to what you're doing, Lyle, where I'll do what's called selling the test drive, which is I'll throw one dart at the competitor, in this case, CapShare. And in the case of CapShare, I knew that they wouldn't do any accounting services in addition to the software. And so what I would say is I'd be like, honestly, Lyle, you're probably not going to switch off this thing. But a lot of CFOs that I talk to are a little bit surprised when they realize that they can get all of their accounting services for free when they're working with Carta. And that usually makes up for the 10K. I'm not saying we're going to be way cheaper than that, but there are ways we can skinny this thing down or beef it up. But can I at least get a minute later on when I'm not calling you out of the blue to walk you through some options? And so I'm throwing that dart and I'm using that dart to try to get them in the car and sell the test drive.
Lyle, I want to ask you about the stalls that you were talking about earlier. You were saying there's a difference between an objection to the buying process or something related to the product and a stall. And you shared in the prep call that a stall might be, hey, we'd take a look, but we're stuck in a contract right now, so can't do this. How do you respond to a stall? So somebody says, hey, we're stuck in a contract for another 6 months. We're not going to take a look right now.
It goes back to the same point. If I've done adequate, proper discovery, I can say, makes a lot of sense. Not asking you to even rip and replace. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to come in as a supplemental tool to multiply the effectiveness of your data, right? We talked about your reps spending 4 to 6 hours a week looking for data elsewhere. We can still give them that time back without ripping and replacing anything here.
You're right, because what you're doing is you're orienting around, it doesn't matter if they have one vendor, it doesn't matter if they have 2 vendors, it doesn't matter if they have 15 vendors. If the problem that existed originally has not been solved, then the investment they made with somebody else is a sunk cost. And you are reorienting around, hey, are you looking to get this problem solved still? Because if you uncover a problem, it doesn't matter if they have 12 solutions. You can solve that problem. Problem still exists. So we've talked about a lot related to cold calling. And the reality of cold calling is a lot of times we end up hitting voicemail way more than we end up hitting people and getting to even confirm that they're the right person. So talk to me about your philosophy related to voicemails.
Sounds, hey, this is Lyle over at RocketReach. We've been doing a lot of good work with companies in your space. We've been helping them do X, Y, and Z, tangible business outcomes that persona cares about. I think we could be doing a lot for your company. Talk soon.
Is there any call to action at the end of it?
I'll send an email after. I'll say, per my voicemail, summarize what I've shared in the voicemail. Based on the way we've been helping companies do blank, I think we could also be doing a lot for you guys as well.
And do you use that same script for each of the successive voicemails, or do you change it over time?
Yes, I'll mix in something different for sure. The next one could be where I'm just highlighting a case study. Acme was able to go from blank to blank after leveraging our solution, 700 million person profiles across 65 million companies. Our data is updated in real time. I can only imagine the impact. Open to taking a peek at our data.
I actually have a lot of similar ingredients in the way that I leave 2 voicemails. I'll oftentimes just reverse the order. So instead of introducing myself up front, I'll explain how I work with other folks like them. So I used to call tech companies a lot. And so I would say, hey, Nick, we work with a bunch of Andreessen portfolio companies. I'm going to send you an email after this. No need to call me back. Would you let me know if it's even moderately interesting? It's Armand from Pave. And so I use the context, and then I tell them, don't call me back. Look at my email. Go figure out how I worked with those other people like you. Here's my name so you can identify it. And then to your point, in the second voicemail, I'll add one more piece of info because just getting them to look at the email based on the mutual context didn't work. I'll usually add the problem we solve. And so I'll say, hey, Nick, we work with a few other Sequoia portfolio companies. The reason that I'm reaching out is most of the time they get really, really sick of paying for all those extra accounting services when they're already paying for cap table software. We have some ways to make sure that you get all those things for free if you work with us. I'm going to assume that you're not going to switch, but I'll send you an email after this. Mind letting me know there if it's even moderately interesting. It's Armand from Carta in that case, and then I'll hang up. And so I use the problem to draw them out a little bit more. And what you're doing is by drawing them back to the email and continuously calling them, you're letting them know I'm going to keep calling you until you reply to my freaking email. And so you get your calls to attach to your emails.
Yeah.
Talk to me about when your SDRs are dialing. Let's say they have a 1-hour dial block. What are some of the keys to running a well-focused 1-hour dial block?
Yeah, you want to be as organized as you can. So that means organizing that hour. I'm going after whether it's a certain industry or a certain persona level. For us, industry. right? We have industry related talk tracks, whether we're going after a staffing and recruiting company or we're going after a higher education institution. We're going to call one industry for an hour so that when someone picks up, we know where we're going, we know the talk track, how you're going about finding candidate data, right? It's always about speaking in the industry jargon, right? That your prospect speaks. You want to speak their language.
When I think about dial blitzes, because this is something that I've had to do a lot at 30 Minutes to President's Club, because there's a lot of context switching. Best practices for a focused call blitz. 1, separate the finding of contact information and the research from the actual execution of the dials. Because if I think about the headspace you need to be in to be cold calling, it's really, really different than the headspace you need to be in when you're doing your research or when you're sequencing accounts. One is a very active, almost combat sport. You're going to be getting on the phone. You're going to be dealing with angry prospects. You have to be high energy for that. And then the other is almost very, very passive. You're sifting through data. You're doing a lot of clicking and organizing. Those are really different headspaces. And my recommendation is, if you're making cold calls, set up your cold calls for Tuesday on Monday afternoon. So find your list, prep your list, scrub your list, so that on Tuesday, you can just rip through those dials and not have to ping pong back and forth. The other thing that's really helped, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I have a standing desk and I am standing up. And Armand, you used to always be like, dude, you should stand up when you make cold calls. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I guess it brings my energy up. But what I realized was standing up during a dial blitz actually helps me have more body English to focus on my delivery of what I say. And it allows me to move and get my tone right when I'm making calls. So those are some things that I've tried to implement into my dial blitzes.
I would always document the path. So your number one, your gold tier dials are your direct mobile dials that are verified. So tag those ones as green in your sales engagement platform. Your yellow ones are your phone trees. And what you want to do is you want to document the path within the phone trees. So for example, if it's like, hello, punch in the last 4 letters of this person's whatever name, you type in 4672, you take that note on the account and you mark it as yellow because it's not a great dial, but at least there's a path. And then there are the red ones. And the red ones are the ones where you know they lead to a dead end. So it's like a gatekeeper that you can't get past, or it's a corporate line that has no actual phone tree. And you want to make sure you don't keep dialing these things over and over and over again. The first time you dial a bad number should be the last time you dial a bad number. And that almost never actually happens.
One more question I have for you. So you mentioned earlier your philosophy related to voicemails. And I think you said leaving something like 4 to 5 voicemails over I think it was like a 2 to 3 week period. Can you talk to me about the sequences that you're using and the density of touches over a month-long period? Like, how do you set up your sequences?
So the way that we structure our sequences, we like to call them clusters, right? So let's say cluster 1, right? You have a LinkedIn connection, a phone call, and your first email. I like to follow up in thread. So if I don't get a response back in 24 hours, I'm going to hit them with a reply in thread, some sort of funny GIF or some visual that also explains what we're offering or the value behind RocketReach and what we're selling here. Maybe it's like a Venn diagram or a side-by-side comparison. I'll follow up again with another bump the day after with thoughts, standalone, lowercase, 2 question marks at the end. And I'll also call multiple times inside of those 3 days. But that's like the first cluster. So we'll go cluster 1, cluster 2, same format, cluster 3. But it's a different talk track. It's a different value proposition. And it's also a different theme of messaging. So some messaging, right? You're coming in with a case study. You could be coming in as a thought leader. You could be creating FUD, so fear, uncertainty, and doubt in what they're doing today. You could be creating FOMO, right? Talking about what others in the space are doing that they aren't. The best way to get someone to respond is to trigger them emotionally. You don't know what theme or style of messaging is going to get them to engage with you. So that's why you have to get through the sequence. It could be the 5th cluster that really hits home. And as far as the length goes, most of my sequences will last 2.5 to 3 weeks. But if I don't have anything else to say that's valuable, I'm not going to keep going for the sake of it. But then we do put them in repeat call sequences and also repeat LinkedIn sequences to continue to engage on those platforms.
I love your cluster philosophy, which is I see a lot of salespeople, they create a pattern in their sequence where they'll reach out once a week for a given time period. And the problem with that is then you blend in with the noise. It's actually part of the reason that gas-powered leaf blowers are extremely, extremely annoying, is their noise cadence from them is not consistent. I'm serious. I know y'all are laughing at me. I'm 100% serious. If there's construction going on or a leaf blower, there's a lot of variances in the noise pattern, and your brain isn't able to tune it out. And so you actually need to be a gas-powered leaf blower with your outreach where there are spikes or clusters, because that gets your prospect's attention rather than very, very consistent stuff. So, Lyle, this has been a great episode. We are sadly running out of time, and so I've got to move us to our final question. And so my last question is, what is one bad habit that you see a lot of salespeople exhibiting that you think they need to break because it hurts them more than it helps?
I'd like to see more sales reps coming to their leaders, their coaches, their teammates when things aren't going well. Come to us, come to your team, say, hey, I got off a tough call. This didn't work. What would you guys do differently here? Come to me. I always encourage my reps, like, this is an open door. No question is a silly question. I want to help you and give you everything that's in my brain, but also probe you and challenge you. Think outside the box and think creatively. Sometimes I feel like I don't get enough opportunities to do that with the reps on the fly. So if you're a rep out there listening, go to your leader when you're stuck. Go to one of your peers who's crushing it or has been doing really well. And because if you're doing something or if you're struggling with something, 9 times out of 10, someone else next to you is as well. So just continue just to be vocal when you're seeking feedback or anything constructive for that matter.
I love it. Seek to be improved, not just approved. Lyle, thank you for joining us. Everybody stick around for a 60-second recap coming up soon.
Your top 4 actionable takeaways from this episode with Lyle Ryals include: number 1.
When you are prospecting, do not underestimate the impact of using visuals, stuff like GIFs or Venn diagrams in your prospecting email can be a really powerful visual tool to get your prospect's attention. Number 2, when your prospect shares that they're on a competing solution to yours, find out how long they've been on it and what prompted them to make that move to the solution in the first place. That should uncover the problem that they were looking to solve or the outcome they were looking to accomplish to make that move. Now you can ask, has it been solved? And if that problem has not been solved, now you have an opening to reroute to how you solve the problem.
Number 3, voicemails. Always direct them back to an email. Never ask for a callback. And then lastly, voicemails again. Number 4, you're going to leave 2. Your first one should be pretty short. I like to have it be context only. And then your second one can give them a little bit more information, whether that's a problem or a case study. But again, direct back to the email. Alrighty, Nick, how can people help us out here?
So if you want to put some of this advice into practice, we worked with the RocketReach team to put together a toolkit that's free that details 8 ways that you can triple your phone connects, meaning people you actually connect with on the phone, and email opens. It doesn't matter if you write the best email in the world or have the best cold call opener in the world. If you don't actually connect or get your email opened, your messaging is literally going to go unseen or unheard. There's a link in the show notes to go get that for free. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the show.